Dorothy, just go down to the corner and you'll see a mic.
It's the bottom left.
You can hit that mic. You can.
Where it says start video or mute.
Yeah, right next to it says mute. That's right. Just hit mute. That'll be great. A couple more people to mute.
Yeah, we got it. On mute. Do I do start video?
Only if you want to appear to let everyone see you while you're listening.
Well, I click on mute, but it doesn't. Do I click on my box?
Just click on that mute button, the microphone there.
There you go.
Taking over.
Dorothy, it's muted. It's showing it's muted.
Yes, it is.
I suspect we're ready to start.
I think so. Let's go. Sounds good.
Thank you for all the help. And we appreciate all the work that's gone into putting together this conference. We hope we know what we're doing here, but it looks like we're on live with Charles's help here. So this particular session, I'm going to go over the prospectus, which many of you have already read, is a contact session that reflects upon the presenters. That's me, Bob, and
Vicki.
Experience in logotherapy, which includes management and editing, the International Forum of Logotherapy, organization and teaching of institute courses, and relationships with many of the Institute's early members. So we plan for the format of the session to emulate poolside chats that have occurred during in-person World Congresses over the years, which what happens there is we go out to the pool there by the side of the Marriott, not because we swim, but because that's the only place you can smoke cigars. So we go out there and other people show up. John Vitorito in particular, who brings cigars with him, and we chat. And that's what the intent of this particular session is about. We've had the opportunity to chat with a number of the old folks in logotherapy over the years because we've been around almost from the beginning. And over time, there were fewer of them, and we're still here. And we realized at some point now we are the old folks. So our involvement began about the same time the Institute was founded by Joe Fabry, and we've continued since then. Although we weren't there in California and we were not a part of the founding of the Institute. With Vicki's assistance, I've written a number of memories and short stories. And what I'm doing there is writing these under the tentative title of stories I might tell my grandkids. And they have to do with a lot of aspects of our life, but some of them have to do particularly with logotherapy. So I look at this as part of what Frankl talks about when he talks about looking at the full granaries of our lives rather than the stubble field that we see right in front of us, looking back at the full granaries that we've established. And in order to do that, I thought it might be a good challenge and interesting and useful to actually write them down, not just think about them once in a while, but write them down. And it turned out that I enjoyed doing that. It was a lot of fun, and I belong to some writing groups and I get feedback on those. So I've actually been doing this since I retired. It's part of my activity in retirement, is to reminisce with Vicki and contact people and who are a part of my past and write them down. And again, as I said, some of them happen to be, of course, about logotherapy, and those are the ones that we're wanting to talk about today. I said the short stories and essays include examples of application of logotherapy, understanding underlying principles, historical observations, practical tips, and insiders' observations. So the process of this session will begin with presenting one of the essays about logotherapy principles and its application ideas. Then it'll evolve into additional conversations and readings or reminiscences based upon the questions and comments of the participants. So I was glad that Charles was able to turn on the ability to speak rather than having to do this all on the chat. So you can punch on your microphone and have a question at any point that you want to. So again, this is supposed to simulate the situation by the poolside there in Texas, where I'm used to 90 or so degrees of temperature, instead of sitting in my house by the edge of a cornfield in the middle of Iowa in the 40s. So first thing we're going to do, let me read the educational objectives. Within the context of a contact session, presentation, and reminiscence, participants will enhance understanding of one or more basic logotherapy principles. 2, gain at least one practical tip about applying logotherapy. And 3, experience at least one example of short-term application of logotherapy. So one of these papers that I told you that I had written covers all of that. So I'm going to start out, and we're going to read that paper, and then all of our educational objectives will be met, and we can just go on and do whatever else we want to do after that. Now, if you look under the, I think it was called documents, you can download a list of all of the stories that were relevant to logotherapy. And also there are a number of interview items that was published in the International Forum. So those are listed on there. If you look under poll, there is a poll to ask you which of the stories you might be interested in based only on a very short title. So if you take the poll, the idea is we're going to read a couple of papers, meet the criteria, then we're going to listen to questions like we would at poolside and respond to the questions. If we get through the questions, then we're going to just go back to the papers, and the poll is supposed to tell us which ones are the ones that most people want to hear. And maybe I'll be able to figure out how to get to the poll if it comes to that point. So I figure, based on what we do at poolside in Texas and how long it takes there, and you add together the stuff we've got here, we've got maybe 8, 10, 12 hours worth of discussion here. So obviously we're only going to get started, and it's going to be how it feels there in Texas. We're just getting started, and then we all have to go somewhere and do something. It's kind of the way it is. So I'm going to start with a paper that's titled Examples of My Experiences with Short-Term Logotherapy. Again, this is designed to, well, this I hope will cover all of the educational objectives at once. Vicki's going to play a patient for us in this one. When problems come on fast and have existed for a short time, logotherapy often takes only a few sessions, sometimes just one session. So I'll break out from the paper as the urge hits me and say, that's one of my general principles in looking at how long it might take me to do therapy, and particularly logotherapy. If this is a sudden thing, I can usually work it out pretty quickly. But if this has been going on for a long time, it's unusual for the therapy to take just a short session, few sessions. This relationship between problem duration and therapy duration is a general rule, which I've noticed whether the problem started with a physical, psychological, or spiritual issue. In my career as a clinical psychologist, the staff on locked psychiatric wards called me many times to see recently arrived patients who displayed anger about their confinement behind locked doors. These patients initiated hostile disruptions on the ward. So these people are locked up in psychiatric wards and they don't like it and they're causing all kinds of trouble. And so the staff gets on the phone and calls me. I don't really work on this ward, but they know I'll come over and do this, and said, this guy is causing all kinds of problems. What can you do? Physicians could not discharge these persons to less confining levels of care until their uncontrollable activities decreased. My conversations with patients often went along these lines. Thanks for seeing me. I want to talk with you about what you think of this ward. I hear it upsets you.
I don't like it here.
Well, staff tells me you're causing a lot of problems.
I hate them. They keep me locked up.
Yeah. I wouldn't like being locked up either.
This stinks.
Well, what makes it bad for you? Tell me why you don't like it here.
I don't want to stay here. They tell me what to do. They control all of us. There's no freedom. I want out.
Okay, you mentioned freedom. So you're saying you have a value for your freedom and that it's important to you.
Yes, of course. Highly important to me. I want out of this place. I want my freedom back.
Well, what if I told you they sent me here to talk about how to get out of this locked ward and gain more freedom? Would it be worth any effort, any work to have more freedom?
What do you mean? What work?
Well, we could develop a plan to get you out of here if you want. I've done that with a lot of other people here.
And you will get me out of here?
I can't discharge you myself. Staff on the unit makes that decision. But I will tell you, they called me over here to work with you if you decide. So they can get you to go somewhere less confining. What do you think? Is freedom worth some effort on your part?
I want freedom. I want out.
Okay. They told me they keep you here because of unpredictable, disruptive behavior. So it seems to me getting out will require you to choose to become less unpredictable to them, less disruptive, which keeps you here and doesn't accomplish your goal. Your goal for more freedom. Of course, you might instead continue what you've been doing. You can make that choice, but it hasn't worked so far. Would it be worth the effort to get out of here to gain more freedom?
Well, I might consider it. I want out of here. I want my freedom.
Okay, let's think of a plan together. Conversations like this one refocus patients away from their emotional reactions to the confinement on the locked unit, refocus them onto their underlying values. In this example, the value is freedom. The patients become motivated to participate in treatment to lead to discharge. So in logotherapy terms, I employed the self-distancing component of the patient's defiant power of the human spirit to let her value system provide its direction-giving effect. I first acknowledged the patient's emotional reaction of anger. Then I helped her step back and look at the situation as a problem involving more than her emotional reaction or more than her anger. The problem included her responsibility for her behavior and its impact on staff decisions. Once the patient stepped back from her hyper-focused anger, she could recognize a bigger picture of her situation and of herself. The broader view included her value for freedom. We gain a broader perspective when we step back from our immediate reactions. Frankl time and again paraphrased Nietzsche with, "He who has a reason why can put up with almost anyhow." The locked ward patient's value for freedom helped her decide to control her angry feelings and make a decision to pursue a value more important to her, which was freedom. The discussion led to a plan to gain freedom. In other words, she put up with and controlled her inclination for anger in order to actualize her value for freedom. Another situation where logotherapy helps is in the despair experienced by terminally ill patients. Logotherapy recognizes that people dislike suffering, of course, but it further recognizes that despair on top of the suffering makes it even worse. Frankl developed the formula, despair equals suffering plus meaninglessness. When suffering itself cannot be eliminated, reduction in the feelings of meaninglessness can at least help. The suffering itself may remain, but finding meaning to counteract the sense of meaninglessness reduces the added despair. Logotherapy brings the individual's underlying value system to the surface and finds a way to actualize one or more values, which increases meaning and reduces despair. Throughout my career, physicians called me often to the hospital bed of terminally ill patients. So the first example was actually from my work as a VA psychologist here at the Knoxville VA hospital. Now, the second example is something that happened more frequently in the local hospital, which I did as a part-time activity for many years after my VA work. So I would leave the VA at quitting time, which was 4:30 our time, and then go on to the hospital in our local town. And this is what I would be called into many times there. Within introductions, relationship building, and informed consent, my conversation included the fact that the patient's doctor had consulted me to help them deal with their situation. I inquired about what had been important in the patient's life. Here I sought a glimpse into their underlying values. Then I inquired what the patient could do now, despite their situation, to continue to actualize those same values. Many conversations went along these lines. So your doctor asked me to talk with you regarding your situation. It's bad, I know, but I can discuss with you some things you might do even now, some things perhaps important to you. Tell me, what has been important to you in the past and remains important to you now and in the future, regardless of your situation?
My family is important to me.
Tell me about your family and what you did with them or for them. The patient and I then discussed their relationships, interactions, and related accomplishments. Were there times when you put them ahead of yourself, maybe sacrificed what you preferred because of your love for them? We proceeded to discuss situations where they put their loved ones ahead of their own preferences. Is there something to do now for them, even now, like you did so many times in the past?
I don't see how.
Well, you've always loved them. You told me that, and that's clear. What might you do to love them even now? Maybe some words to say to them, maybe some information you want to give them now. The patient usually could determine a way to show the family they still love them, would always love them. At times, they brought up unfinished business. Other times, they brought up information they wanted loved ones to know. Often, they just wanted to tell the others what they meant to them. Now is the time to do that. It might not be easy, but it's important. It's a value of yours, and you will feel positive about accomplishing it, even if it takes courage and energy on your part. In a way, it constitutes another sacrifice to make for their sake, just like you have sacrificed for them in the past. The patient and I then developed a plan together to accomplish their new goal, emphasizing the actualization of the value of love. At times, these plans included rehearsal and role play with the patient. Sometimes the plans included my presence with the patient and the family members together, but more often the patient had motivation to fulfill the plan without me present. In logotherapy terms, I employed the other component of the patient's defiant power of the human spirit, that is self-transcendence. This allowed his or her value system its direction-giving effect. In this second scenario, I first acknowledge the patient's situation, then I help the individual focus onto a meaning or value beyond themselves. Next, I explored opportunities that remained possible to respond in accord with their long-held value system. Once the patient has a purpose in accordance with their values to fill the next moment or the next hour or the next day with meaning, they recognize a goal they can accomplish. Their suffering remains, but they focus on meaning. Meaninglessness decreases and thus the despair lessens. Physicians told me their patients became less depressed, less despairing after these interventions, and the physicians continued to consult me when they had similar cases. Sometimes family members contacted me and thanked me for helping their loved ones find peace. In the situations represented above, logotherapy surfaced the individual's value system to let it have its direction-giving effect. These situations were acute and abrupt onset, and they needed immediate intervention. So that's the first paper. And we're open to questions or comments or thoughts. But you have to push your microphone on to do that.
Bob and Vicki, it's Deborah. Hi.
Good to hear
Hi.
your voice.
Oh, good to see you all. My question is it hard to get to the values sometimes?
I don't think so. I go in with the intention of looking for the values. I will tell people that when I'm going in. So not only am I looking for that, but I'm alerting them to that is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So to find the value, and a lot of times you have a value or two that you most often find. So like going on to the locked unit, I know the reason I was called over there was because the person was causing problems. And more often than not, they wanted out of there. So I knew that freedom was going to be a value probably for the majority of persons that I was called in for. And then when I was called to the local hospital, you can almost always count on the persons having, getting to a value of love for their family and not wanting to leave their family along behind, and the loss. And what I'm doing there is just looking for that value of helping their family. You've always had that value, and I'm just pointing out to them, you can still do it. If you get away from the focus on loss and focus onto helping your family, which you have done. Now, sometimes it wasn't a family, sometimes it was, just one person, sometimes it was something else than family, but there was almost always something, and more generally family, that I kind of knew was a high probability going in.
The reason I ask is I was thinking about Alex's talk this morning, and for the people who feel like they haven't gotten enough if they're dying, and how would you unearth their values? Because they may be stuck there.
Yeah, if they feel like they haven't gotten enough, the part about enough out of life.
Yes, or enough or enough attention from their family, or not enough love in their lives.
Mm-hmm. And what I would focus there on is on what they can do with themselves, and how they can stand for what they believe in, which is the value they have for an attitude of love. And get around to, I didn't have Alex's story about the lady and the pears. We'll have from now on, because we have a special relationship with pears. So that really struck me. Hutzell, it means dryer of pears, which I learned from Joe Fabry. I didn't know before that. So anyway, that story really struck me, but think about what they did in that story. He said, basically, if you do what you need to do to actualize your values, that's what you can do, and you can feel good about that. If you do what you're doing as a manipulation or a transactional type of relationship, you may win, you may lose. So I would go back to that particular way of approaching it. Although, as I said, I didn't have that story before now. Well, that was a great story. Look, you can actualize your value system. You can maintain certain values, even at the situation where you're terminally ill. So you can have this attitude of what you're going to do, regardless of what the others have done.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Thanks.
Hey, Bob, it's Rod Deezer here, down the road in Iowa. But hey,
Up the road. It's up the road from here, Rod.
You're right. It's up the road. That's right. We're in the northern part of Iowa. I'm curious about something. I want to make sure I heard you right. That you mentioned that sometimes, family members were, quite involved, and other times family members were not. Assuming I heard that right, just curious how you differentiated, how you made that decision. And I guess the preface for this question is, sometimes when I've worked with adolescents, it's been wonderful to have family members involved, and other times it wasn't so good to have family members involved. So I'm just sort of curious in the most broad way, Bob, of how you tried to differentiate that.
That was actually up to the patient, the degree to which families would be involved always was a consequence of what the patient wanted in those situations. So I had no demands on the patient. If you want the family involved and they want to be involved, good. But if not, to whatever degree and whatever part of the family, or sometimes the patients had a person that they needed to say something to. And sometimes I would play that person and role play before they brought the person in.
Yeah, sounds pretty straightforward. You let the patient or the client make that decision. If they wanted to go with it, you went with it. So thank you.
Right. Okay. Anybody else has a question? We'll listen for that. And if not, we're going to go on to a different kind of paper about the Forum for Logotherapy. When are we supposed to quit? Guess I should have written that down.
12:30, Bob.
12:30, okay. So that would be 11:30 our time. Thanks, John.
Right.
You live in a different time zone than we do.
Right.
Okay. Because we spent so much time with the International Forum for Logotherapy, I'm going to go on to that one next. And we're going to start out with a little bit of history about the forum, which Vicki's going to give us.
This is a brief history of the forum. Joe Fabry wrote a letter to Bob in 1997 about the early history. He wrote, "As to the early history, in 1974, I began publishing a semi-annual magazine called UniQuest for a leadership in Unitarian churches. Each issue had a topic: ecological imperative, intimate ethics, painful wisdom of the survivor. I reprinted articles from other magazines with the author's permission, as well as original material. The magazine became more and more logotherapeutic and had articles by Frankl. The last issue in 1978 was completely Frankl, called Festival of Meaning, containing papers read at the opening of the Frankl Library memorabilia in Berkeley. By that time, I had established the Institute of Logotherapy and decided to publish the magazine under the title of the International Forum for Logotherapy as the publication of the Institute. So the first official issue of the journal, the International Forum for Logotherapy, Journal of Search for Meaning, was published by Joe in 1978. Articles published under the primary editorship of Joe Fabry were winter 1978 through fall 1989. In the late 1980s, Bob began helping Joe with the journal, and in 1990, Bob became co-editor with Joe. Articles published under the co-editorship of Joe Fabry and Bob Hutzell were spring 1990 through spring 1999. When Joe stopped editing due to health issues, Bob continued the primary editorship from autumn 1999 through fall 2016. Thus, Joe served as editor and co-editor for over 20 years. Then Bob served as co-editor and editor for over 25 years. Marshall Lewis came on board and assisted from 2014 through 2016. Then Anne Marie Neal came on board for 2017 and 2018. After the spring issue of 2018, Bob retired from the forum and it went into hiatus until 2021, when Cindy Wimberly edited and Rod Deeser assisted edited an electronic issue with intent for Rob Deeser to become the editor for Forum future issues. Okay, that's the history.
Okay, so I've got some numbers and statistical information here because I like numbers and statistical information. In the recent years with the journal before it went into hiatus, articles ran somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 words, and they filled new articles, regular articles, filled about half the journal pages. And about half of those regular articles were submitted from persons in the United States, and about half of those were submitted from persons not in the United States. People often ask about acceptance rates. We didn't do numbers and didn't do the editing the same way as maybe an APA journal, so it's hard to say. But I estimated that about 1 out of 5 papers got accepted without much editing, and about 1 out of 5 became accepted eventually with some editing, and about 30% took a whole lot of editing, and about 30% just didn't fit. So about a third of the papers that came in didn't actually make it into the journal, but I think close to 70% did make it into the journal. Now, my goal there when I received a paper was for it to make it into the journal. So I also did review editing for APA journals, where basically what you do is you look for ways to not accept, and you don't give a whole lot of feedback. My goal was to accept, but that often required a whole lot of feedback, and many papers, what we ended up with was a short paper on a part of what was originally submitted. So we took a much higher percentage eventually than an APA journal would accept, but that in part was because of our goal there. And then Vicki did the bulk of the managerial work for us, and she started that in the 80s when I started working on the journal. And that's a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff that you never see. We won't necessarily go over that, although we have some of that written down, but all the way to putting the stickers on the envelopes, ordering the journals that always came from the print shop in California, to standing at the post office window with the local clerk stamping and recording each of the journals that did not go within the United States in bulk mail. So standing at the window for each mailing of the non-domestic items took about 2 hours, and the post office literally brought in a person to work extra hours for us so that Vicki could get the journal in the mail and out to you folks outside of the USA. Inside the USA went bulk mail, and we could put those all in the window in tubs that they just took and went from there. That was easy, but outside was quite an ordeal. So I think we're close to the end of our time, so we should probably see if there's any more questions we can get to rapidly. And we haven't done about 95% of what we had thought we might have available.
Bob and Vicki, we have some extra time, so we can go another 10 minutes or so. The recording doesn't cut off then till then.
Okay, let's see if we have some more questions.
Bob, maybe
John.
this, how are you? Good to see you and Vicki again. This may be a question for Rod also. When is the regular journal going to be coming up again on a biannual basis? Do we know?
Bob, do you want me to help with that, or do you want to handle that? It's Rod.
I am not at all involved in that. That's primarily Rod and Cindy, so I could not answer that question, but I suspect Rod might.
So I'll say this really quick, and Cindy, if I'm off, please correct me. So we're making that transition now. So I worked as an assistant under Cindy as I was working on my diplomate, which I just completed here about a month or so ago. So Cindy did the bulk of the work on the last issue. The one previous that, I did the bulk of the work, learning the ropes. And we're hoping starting in 2020 that we'll have them both scheduled regularly, the one in the autumn and the one in the, I think it was the fall, or spring. Yeah, autumn and spring, obviously. And we think we're on schedule for that. So I'll leave it at that. So we can go back to questions for Bob.
John, we were supposed to print or to send out the one that just went out earlier, but with Dr. Barnes' death, it threw a glitch in some things, and so that's why it's late. Hopefully they will now be about every 6 months, and we will have one coming out this fall is our plan, so we should be back on schedule.
Thanks, Rod and Cindy. Will that be a hard copy or just electronic?
They'll be electronic from now on.
Okay, thank you.
I have
Okay.
a question, Bob and Vicki, that's not on what you spoke about yet, but you had on your handout something about the symbol and Joe Fabry. I'm curious how that came about. We have it in our curriculum, but I've never heard the story.
Well, let me just tell you the story that I've written for my grandkids to someday read when they get old enough to want to do that. Tell me about the symbol, Joe. He sat on one side of the old wooden table in our 1.5-story stucco house in Knoxville, Iowa. Coffee aroma filled the air, and the smells of Vicki's progress with breakfast wafted our way from the kitchen. Bob, by the symbol, what do you mean? I lifted my heavy porcelain cup, blew away the steam, and took a sip. You know, Joe, the symbol on the journal and on the letterhead. I can't figure it out. Joe Fabry, slight of frame, bald, grandfatherly in appearance and demeanor, did not respond, appeared to ponder the question. Joe, who created it? His eyes twinkled when he replied, I did. Founder of the Institute of Logotherapy in the United States, Joe Fabry came to Knoxville, Iowa in the autumn of 1982. He and others had established the Institute in 1974 in California, and promotion outside the original San Francisco Bay Area was now a goal. I did not know Joe, but at the recommendation of Jim Crumbaugh, I phoned him. Would he come to Iowa to present a workshop to our staff on Viktor Frankl and logotherapy and the search for meaning in life? Joe readily agreed to come. He stayed with us in our house on Washington Street, played with 6-year-old Daisy and 4-year-old Jilly. And now he and I rested a few minutes before breakfast, before our return to the VA auditorium. Joe smiled across the table at me. Bob, what does the symbol look like to you? What do you think it signifies? Well, it kind of reminds me of a boat, a Viking ship with 3 shields on its side. the shield on the left and the one on the right are round. The one in the middle looks like that new game character, Pac-Man. Joe nodded his head up and down. Bob, what do you think it signifies? I stroked my mustache. Viking ships searched and explored. The Pac-Man character pursues. Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Your book explains Frankel's philosophy in common English and is titled The Pursuit of Meaning. Yesterday, you said the Institute has a goal to increase awareness of the practicality of Frankel's philosophy to a broad English-speaking population. Joe continued to smile, so I proceeded. Therefore, the symbol could stand for the Institute's aspiration to promote Frankel's philosophy and the search and pursuit of life meaning. Joe nodded. Good, good. I had not thought of it that way, but I like your interpretation. Something with a particular connotation for one person can be different interpretations for another person. Life offers us various opportunities each moment, and then we are responsible to decipher the most meaningful for us. How about if I said to observe the symbol and think of a lamp? Yes, Joe, I can see an oil lamp with the handle on the left and the flame on the right. The lamp, knowledge of life, the knowledge of life lamp. I looked at Joe. He nodded. I continued. Frankel's philosophy distinguishes human beings from other animals by our ability to contemplate our existence, particularly the meaning of life. Yes, Joe added. However, Frankel says we have it backwards. We ask life what is its meaning, and we ignore the real question. The real question is life asking us, what will be the meaning of your life? What choices will you make from moment to moment to constitute your own life meaning? I reflected. So the Institute's symbol points us toward knowledge or awareness of our ability to contemplate the meaning of our life and our responsibility to actualize it from moment to moment. Yes, Bob, but there can be even other possibilities to search for. The symbol can suggest those ideas you have mentioned. However, review it with knowledge. We can contemplate many possibilities or potentials to see the right one for us. So I asked, there are more possibilities, more potentials within the symbol. Bob, how about if I give you the knowledge that you should look for a word to complete the significance of the symbol? Huh? I don't understand, Joe. Look at the symbol. Observe the letters. Observe it 4 letters. Tell me your discovery now, since I've helped you to become aware of the potential within the meanings of the symbol. Well, if I start on the left, the bow of the ship sweeps down into the body and can be sort of a capital L. The shields become O, G, and another O. Yes, I see it. And the stern, if it's a ship, or the flame, if it's a lamp, becomes the letter S. It's L-O-G-O-S, the Greek word Frankel interpreted as the meaning, the reason, and the purpose. Joe nodded his head and smiled. So, Joe, the Institute symbol can be seen at many levels, but they all point to awareness of each human being's ability to seek and determine what will be the meaning of their own life. Yes, Bob, and Frankel points this out. We are responsible to decide every moment whether or not to seek that meaning. We can act on our unique human capacity to decipher and respond to the potentials in front of us, or we can fail to pursue the highest meaning and thus just behave as the animals, which we also are. But, Joe, it's kind of hard to see all those possibilities in the symbol. Well, Bob, it's not easy to remember to be human each moment either, to seek the meaning and to act on it. I'm afraid it's easier to act on other or like other animals and jump through hoops rather than pursue the most meaningful for us, what is right for us. Sitting back in his chair as Vicki emerged with the steaming plates of breakfast she had prepared, Joe said, "The meaning of life for the just past moment was to give you knowledge to help you understand the Institute's symbol. And now the meaning of this moment is to thank Vicki for this wonderful breakfast she has prepared for us."
That's a great story.
Thank you, Bob and Vicki. Now I think our time is about up. Thank you.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for attending. It's been fun. And we'll move on to whatever is next. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
It's brilliant to hear your stories, Bob. Thank you. Lovely to see everyone.
Thank you.
Bob, I haven't forgotten.